Please welcome John Drexler.
Wow. Thank you so much. I feel like a professional wrestler or something. That was very exciting. And I'm sorry that I have $0 or euros with me today. I hate to disappoint. But it's a huge honor to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm here to talk about product management. So hi, I'm John. I'm a product manager. I'm also a Laravel developer. And I think a lot about how being a product manager made me a smarter developer and vice versa. Being a product manager made me a smarter developer, and being a developer made me a smarter product manager. And that's what we're here to talk about today. You can find all my links and stuff up there. You may recognize Daniel Colborn. Daniel is my business partner, and we go back a really long ways, all the way back to freshman year of college. You may recognize him because he just completed the Laracon Grand Slam. He went all the way around the globe in 1 year, being the Johnny Appleseed of event sourcing, talking about this package Verbs that he and Chris Morrell built together. Daniel and I started this company, Thunk. So we're a software development agency, and we make Laravel apps with a lot of Livewire as well. We prefer these kind of big, gnarly projects that require a lot of product management, where we understand complex real-world problems and map them onto sometimes pretty complicated software solutions. And we also do a lot of kind of product management as a service, where we join part-time with companies to work with them on this. We work with a lot of awesome clients, just a few that you may know from this conference. Internachi, Chris Morrell is speaking tomorrow. Try Hard Studios with Aaron Francis, who's talking tomorrow. Flux with Caleb Porzio. We use Flux every day. And most recently with Laravel, which we're really excited to be working with them as well. So the whole point of this talk is that developers can benefit a lot from thinking like product managers, from solving problems like product managers, from asking hard, kind of probing questions like product managers. In fact, we think it's best case scenario if everyone in the company is thinking like this. And as we started sort of testing this hypothesis and thinking more about this, we sort of came to the conclusion that actually you're already doing it. If you are making a product, you are making a bunch of small and large product management decisions. If you're putting pixels on a screen, you are making a bunch of decisions, either explicitly or implicitly. And so in this, since you are already doing it, we want to help you to do it a lot better. I want to illustrate what I mean by this, by you're already doing product management, even if you don't recognize that you are. One of the big things that product managers do is they think about roadmap. So they think about what is the sequence of features that we're going to build? What do we build next and why? What's the justification for this? How do we make projects smaller and put them in an order that makes sense for customers and for the developers, and that we do this in a sane way? So if you do a good job and you do your homework on this, you can make a nice, orderly roadmap like this. But what's interesting is that even if you don't have a good process for doing this, you are still doing it. You're just maybe doing it without naming it. You're doing it implicitly. You're making maybe a series of haphazard decisions that lead you to a roadmap. You start in the right place, but then you jump into feature F too early, and you didn't realize it was actually blocked by these 3 other things, and everyone's frustrated, and it's taking forever, and you end up doing 4 projects at once, and it all gets done. And the point is, even if you didn't have a plan, even if you said, well, you don't really do road mapping here, it's like, well, you are shipping your features in some order, right? And so why not do a better kind of orderly job with that? Another way of looking at this is one of the main things that I look at a lot as a product manager is the scope of a project, right? You're gonna make a feature, what goes in and what goes out? What do we leave on the sidelines? What do we cut? And if you do your homework well, you might find categories like this. This is approximately the proportion I often see, where you've got your core requirements that are really critical for actually getting this project done. You've got some maybe quick wins that are worth doing, even though they're not strictly required. And maybe you have this big blob, this big ugly blob up here of these ambiguous ideas that you're not so sure about. Maybe they're cuttable, maybe we don't need them yet, and if we end up building them, it's gonna be a lot of code we have to maintain, and just not so sure about it. So if you do a really good job with this, and you've done your homework, you can make a nice surgical, precise cut, right? And you can make a feature that is exactly what it's supposed to be with none of the junk that you don't need. But again, even if you don't have a good process for doing this, these ideas still exist. It's just you don't know what bucket any of these ideas goes into, right? And so you lack good information, but you still ship a feature, right? So you've still made a cut line somewhere. Someone, either you or your boss or somebody else, made a decision, maybe it was explicit, maybe it was implicit, about what goes in this feature, and you made a cut line. Maybe you included a bunch of stuff that you didn't actually need, and you missed out on some stuff that you did need, but the point is, just like the roadmap, you did implicitly make a cut line somewhere. So I'm here to give you a better tool to do this. Developers love getting new tools. You have your giant toolkit of Laravel, which helps you with all sorts of stuff. Maybe you're a bit of a designer and a Tailwind expert, and you've picked up a lot of Livewire skills over the years, and so a lot of the developer experience is acquiring new tools and showing them off to your friends. So I'm here to give you a new tool. Product management, I don't mean this to be so threatening as a knife, but product management, this is the best kind of metaphor that I can come up with, is like the best pocket knife you've ever had. You use it primarily for cutting through ambiguity, cutting projects down, making them smaller, cutting scope from things. It's also portable and multi-use, right? It's really helpful for making software, but actually it's a toolkit that'll help you with quite a few other things as well. And so it's just this very, very powerful, small, simple device. And I want to skip the jargon while I describe this to you. A lot of people get paid a lot of money to make this sound a lot more complicated than it is. And although I don't think it's easy, I do think a lot of its ideas are simple. And so I don't want to get bogged down with talking about agile and waterfall and all these different things. What I want to do instead is paint for you a picture of what it looks like when it's working really, really well, right? So I just want to show you the goal of where you can be headed if things are working really, really well, and then we can work backwards from there of some practical tips of how to do it. So if you are doing product management well, this sentence is true for you every day. You wake up and you efficiently solve an ordered list of meaningful problems. You efficiently solve an ordered list of meaningful problems. Each word in this sentence is chosen pretty carefully. We're going to take it word by word, but if this is true of you, I'd argue you're probably in the top 5% of development teams. You're killing it. I don't really care how you're doing it. You could be using a totally different process from me, and that might be perfectly appropriate. If this is true, you're doing great. I'm guessing if you are like every team that I've ever been a part of, some part of this is maybe not so true. Maybe the whole thing is not true for you. So let's go through word by word, and we're actually going to start at the end and move backwards. And we're going to start with problems. You should not be a chihuahua. This is a dynamic that I see with a lot of development teams where either people bring them problems and they are scared of them and they shy away, they recoil, they're running away, they're afraid of problems, or people bring them problems and they are a bit feisty and defensive, right? They bite back, and we don't want to do this. We want to embrace problems. So might I suggest instead the humble truffle pig. Consider the truffle pig, curious, industrious, fine taste in mushrooms. So these pigs are trained to root around in the dirt to find truffles, which are very valuable. And you do have to get a bit dirty looking for them, but they're very, very valuable. And I think that this is how you should pursue problems. Remain curious about them, be open to them, search out. You might have to get a bit dirty to do it, but this is really a picture of what you should be day to day. Yes, this means that you're going to have to talk to lots of people. You should be talking to your coworkers, your sales team, your executives. You should be talking to customers. You should be empathizing and listening carefully, seeking out problems with curiosity, because problems are the currency that we use to make the feature good. They're the currency we use to know what users really need. You'll notice that I'm not talking so much about building features. Feature requests are things that you get pelted with on all sides every day of the week by all these different teams. Some of them are maybe good ideas, many of them are terrible ideas, and they're often malformed and not worth doing. And so I don't like to think so much in feature requests. I like to think in terms of problem statements, because problem statements are specific and they're solvable. I want to get into a quick illustration of why this matters. So imagine that a big customer comes up and says, we need this huge new report. You got to add this report into the product right now. This kind of thing comes up all the time, especially if you're doing B2B software. So let's just naively take this at face value, and we're going to start writing a ticket, right? So we got to make this big new report for Acme Corp. Let's just get into it. Let's just start building. We're actually in the middle of developing this new component library, and we got to pick which one we're going to use, and it's going to be kind of a mess. So maybe it's actually blocked by that. In fact, let's just pull it into that project. And by the way, the queries that we use on this page are similar to other pages that have been timing out because they're so slow. We need to optimize some things. Maybe we need some help from Marcel. And also the filters on this. How exactly do we design those? We know what the data is, but there's a lot of different ways you could filter that. How do we do that? And by the way, how do these filters work with pagination? Because we're going to need to write tests to make sure that it plays nicely. Filters and pagination can get kind of weird. And honestly, this is 5 different tickets. Maybe it's a whole project. Hold on, slow down, right? So what happened here? We took a feature request at face value, and we just started building. What happens when you do that is there's no definition of when this is done. There's no definition of why this matters, why we're doing it. And so as a result, it was just able to balloon outward, and we could spend weeks, we could waste a lot of time, light a lot of money on fire, building stuff that was unnecessary. So instead, I suggest that you use this question all day, every day for yourself and everyone around you, which is, what problem does this solve, right? Why are we doing this? Why does this matter? So in this case, we might go back to our customer success manager and they say, oh, well, there's this one really important customer and they use this data on a monthly financial report. We have the data, they don't have access to it. Okay, that makes sense, but when we do custom one-off stuff for customers like this, don't we usually just ask them to download the CSV and kind of build their own report in Excel? Oh, well, they tried that, but the data's not in the CSV. Okay, it's not always this simple, but it is this simple an alarming amount of the time, right? By just interrogating a little bit to understand what the underlying need was behind this request, we've actually found something far simpler. So one suggestion I have for you is whatever ticketing system you're using, or even if it's a plain text document, I don't really care. At the top of everything, write a problem statement. This is so clarifying for you and all the people around you about why this thing matters and when it is done, right? The data is in the product, but it's not available to the CFO, and that is frustrating because they can't write this report that they need. That's solvable, right? There's a lot of ways to solve it. In fact, the simplest way might be, let's just put it in the CSV. This is a pretty good ticket now. This is way smaller and way more focused and precise than what we had before. So if you run around and do this all day, now instead of a big list of feature requests, we have a big list of problem statements. And that's a lot better. We're in a way, way stronger place than we were before. But let's start cutting, right? This is too many problems. It's overwhelming, it's unpleasant. There's a lot of things in there that don't really matter that much. Let's get our knife out and let's cut further, right? We cut through the ambiguity. Now let's just try to cut our list in half. We don't just want a list of problems, we want a list of meaningful problems, right? We don't just want to work on every problem that comes across our plate. So this is you. I'm mixing up my animal metaphors a bit, but this is you. You are a moth to the flame because you are helpful, you are curious, you are a problem solver. These are good things. I applaud you. The trap is you can start working on the wrong problems. You need to be extremely discerning about which problems you solve because many of them don't matter very much and they won't actually help you achieve your goals or to actually help users. So you need to be extremely discerning about which ones you choose. Ben Orenstein got on stage at Laracon a couple years ago and said this: developers value their time at approximately negative $100 an hour. And I have seen this to be true even for myself. The problem is you're expensive, right? It's very likely that you are the single most expensive resource at your company right now. And so it's very critical that you only work on problems that really matter, right? Don't work on meaningless problems. What that means specifically in the context of your company and your goals, I obviously can't say because I'm not familiar with your company and your goals, but I do have some common heuristics here of the kinds of what I call non-problems that show up a lot that you can cut straight off of your list because they seem like they matter, but in fact they don't. I'm going to walk through a few of those. Okay, so a really smart and well-intentioned developer maybe it could be you, maybe it could be your friend, comes up to you and says, hey, I just came up with this cool new abstraction. We're going to just refactor everything. Let's just start from the ground up. I have this awesome idea. It's so cool. So in this moment, again, you are a moth to the flame. You are tempted to ascend into the ivory tower with this developer and discuss the merits of their idea and to debate with them, to go be architecture astronauts and figure out everything about this and hash it out in some big debate. But you're smarter than that. You don't want to do that because you don't know whether or not this matters yet. And so you ask them, what problem would this solve? They say, well, I think it would just future-proof us, right? Like imagine if we had totally different customers who had totally different requirements from all of our existing customers. Wouldn't that be pretty cool if we could future-proof it against that? They have hit you with a classic hypothetical problem. Hypothetical problems are not real problems for real users. Smart people say them, and so they sound like they matter a lot. But because they are not real, we do not attempt to solve them. This is me with my dear mother many years ago. I used to ask lots of hypothetical questions, and she would always say, the world has way too many real problems. We're not working on any of the fake ones. Thanks, Mom. Okay, so we've just crossed a bunch of hypothetical problems off our list. Let's see what's next. Your account manager comes up and says, hey, we have this internal report in our app, and it's grouped by month, but wouldn't it be nice if it was grouped by quarter? Again, you could use a quick dopamine hit. You could just say yes. This wouldn't even take you a whole afternoon, right? It's pretty easy. You know how to do this. But you want to know what problem it solves. What's the underlying thing here? What's going on? And they say, well, once per quarter, I need to aggregate this for something I do internally, and I spend about 4 minutes compiling this stuff myself and adding it together, and I don't know, I'm just kind of annoyed. It'd be nice if you did it for me. This is a trivial problem. I don't recommend that you tell them that it's a trivial problem. That is kind of Chihuahua behavior, and we don't like that. But you can think it in your head. This is trivial. It causes a really small amount of pain for a very small amount of people, right? That is sort of the definition of trivial. You can do these things from time to time to boost morale, to throw somebody a bone. It's a nice thing to do. But in general, I'm guessing that your product, your team, your company, your users have real problems that are really worth solving. Don't spend your time on this stuff. Okay, we got a lot more problems out of our list. Let's try another one. Your community manager, they've been running the forum. They got some bright ideas, right? They come in hot. They say, we have some really great new features we want to add to the forum. We're going to do a real name policy. I want to start collecting e-signatures for our code of conduct. You should allow me to shadow ban people. I got a big list of stuff. I got a big vision for where we're going with this forum. Again, let's pause for a second here. We have some pretty normal, good moderation tools in the forum. What are you getting at here? What's the problem? What's the thing behind the thing? Why does this matter to you today? And they say, well, look, people are just really mean on the internet, right? And I can't argue with it. I've been on twitter.com. I've seen the tweets of one Elon Musk. I agree, it's terrible. The internet's terrible. The problem is, this is a gravity problem, right? This is not actually solvable. People being on the internet, you're about as likely to solve that as you are to solve gravity itself. Since it doesn't have an obvious solution, it's not really a problem that we're going to put on our list to solve, because why would we work on something that we can't solve? It sounds like a really good way to burn time and energy and money. I'm stealing this directly from this awesome guy, Dave Evans, who wrote this book that changed my life, Designing Your Life. You should check it out. Okay, last one. This one is tricky. It comes up all the time. It's very sneaky. Your CEO comes up and says, we want to build a bunch of custom features for this new customer. This new customer came in. They've got a bunch of, they mostly like our product, but they just wish it would change in the following ways. So we're going to build a bunch of custom stuff for them. But at the same time, let's keep things totally universal and simple for everybody. This needs to be a one-size-fits-all solution, right? Make it totally customizable for some people, simple and universal for other people. I'm guessing you've heard this one before. This sounds kind of like two separate problems, right? This one customer has all these specific problems over here, but keeping things simple and universal and with a nice UX is a whole separate set of issues, and it kind of seems like these two things are competing with each other. This is a trade-off, and these come up all the time. And it seems like it's two separate problems that you should be solving, but in fact, since the two sets of problems are opposing each other, this is like a zero-sum game. it's like a tug of war. And so you can really decide where you want to be on that spectrum of customizability versus universality, but you don't really get to solve them. And I've seen this time and again where teams basically get pitted against themselves or pitted against each other to try to solve both at once. It's not really possible, and it's a good way to light money on fire and not solve things and be exhausted at the end. Okay, these were some non-problems that you should avoid. You might be saying to yourself, but John, I'm not a decision maker at my company. I don't get to decide what we work on. Someone else decides for me and I get to decide. Okay, I hear that, but also I don't think that this advice is just for decision makers, right? I actually think that the process works best when everybody, including junior developers, including non-developers, are all weighing in on this and asking these kind of hard, rigorous questions. I started to put in slides about how to do this well, and I ended up accidentally writing an entire other talk. So if you want to talk to me about that, meet me in the lobby or email me. I'd love to talk more. Okay, so we had this list of problems. Now we have a list of meaningful problems, right? We cut half of them out. This is good. We're making great progress. We're in a way better place than we were. But we can do better, right? We don't just want a list of meaningful problems. We want an ordered list of meaningful problems. And this one matters a lot. And even some of the best dev teams I know don't do this. I have been on teams, even really productive, good teams, who have 7,000 medium priority tickets sitting in their backlog. They also use Jira, which don't even get me started. But 7,000 medium priority tickets that are in no particular order. This is not a backlog. This is like a graveyard of broken dreams, right? This is hell on earth. This is bad. Everyone feels bad here. The developers are totally overwhelmed. They see this endless list that they'll never get to. The product managers have no intuition of what matters, right? It could be that issue number 5,241 matters a lot. I have no idea, right? I don't have time to read all this stuff. And the customers and internal teams who have taken the time to report this stuff feel like none of the things they report are getting worked on. Not if this is familiar? Yeah, okay. So pretty much everyone here. So this matters, again, just to go back to the beginning of this talk, this matters because you do have an order. Even if you haven't said so explicitly and haven't written it down, look back at everything you've shipped up to date and everything you will ship in the future. It will necessarily have an order, right? Even if you don't have a roadmap, you have a roadmap. So it matters to take the time to get it right. So what are the goals? Again, keeping things really simple. The goals with having an order are, 1, there is an ordered list. And 2, people can know what the order of problems you're going to solve is, right? So if there's a sales team who always wants to kind of bother you about these sorts of things, there's a link that you've given them that is here's our list of priorities that are in order. And thirdly, the criteria that you use to make this order are explicit. What this does is this allows you to put urgent requests into context, right? So on that Tuesday morning when this customer shows up and says, we desperately need you to make this new report, you are able to point at this thing, which was agreed upon by the company and hopefully executives and other people, to say, okay, well, let's talk about where it goes, right? Because if you're telling me that it's truly number one, if you're telling me that we need to disrupt everything we're doing right now to go work on this thing, you need to visibly see that everything else in the whole list got pushed down one row. Are we okay with that? If we're okay with that, then all right, let's move on. If we're not okay with that, then maybe it's number 7. It's still pretty high, but it's not at the very top of the list. But now we have a justification to say, we're actually not working on this week because it's number 7, and we kind of all agree on that together, right? If you have a list, it's in order, and the criteria is explicit, it allows you to do things like that, which is really helpful and will make your life a lot better. How do you do this? How do you make an order? There's a lot of ways up the mountain, right? I've seen a lot of different things work here. If you're at an early stage company and the answer is well, our founder has a pretty good intuition and they've been right a lot more than they've been wrong and they just made a list, I actually think that's totally valid. I don't think it has to be more complicated than that because that meets the goals of the criteria is explicit, it's what the founder wants, and there's a list and you have access to it, right? At a bigger company, this is again going to be quite a bit more complicated. If you want to see how I do this, again, I started writing it into slides and ended up writing another talk. So I have a spreadsheet that shows exactly how I do this, and you can email me for it, and I will send it to you, and you are able to steal that and use it as you see fit. I'll put my email up again at the end. Okay, finally, this last point, again, I won't be terribly prescriptive about how you do it, but you've got this beautiful list now. You have agreement with all the teams around you about what the order of problems is. You've broken things into problem statements. You've said no to non-problems. You're doing great. Now, you need to sit down and efficiently solve it. I will not give you extremely strong opinions about how you write your code or how you write your tickets or whether you're using sprints or estimations or whatever. I honestly don't really care about that. I care about these three things that I think are pretty universal. First, when you've solved the problem, move on. Don't solve the problem and then apply coats of paint to it for 2 weeks. Don't solve the problem and then solve a bunch of related hypothetical problems that you think maybe will come up in the future. That is a good way to create lots and lots of legacy code that you're now responsible for. It's a really good way to waste a lot of time and money. The thing that gives your work meaning is to solve a large number of meaningful problems. And so solve a problem, move on. Solve a problem, move on. Keep on working your way through the list. Stick to the list. You spend all this time building trust with other teams and your own team about saying, here's what we're going to go do next and why. Do it. Oftentimes what happens when you make this list, if you do it the right way, almost every team I've worked on, if you do it correctly and like the most important things rise to the top, the projects at the top of the list will be the things that you've been avoiding, and that's why they're at the top of the list, is because you've been avoiding them, and they're usually not that fun, or they're really hard, or they're unsexy. Do them. This is like what fosters trust and actually gets you through solving a large list of meaningful problems, and you'll get to the fun stuff once this important stuff is knocked out. Finally, just keep on cutting. Remember that this is a knife. The more you cut, the more you get to do. You get to solve a larger number of meaningful problems if you keep on cutting. Cut scope. Imagine if every project you worked on was 20% smaller, how much farther you'd get to go. Imagine if some of those projects that are ambiguous and poorly defined, and maybe we don't actually need to do them yet, what if you shelved them completely for now? Think about how much more you could do. You can do more, you can solve more problems, your work will have more meaning. That's what I got for you today. Thank you so much for having me.
Great talk.
Thanks.
I got questions.
You got questions?
Yeah, a couple of them. So, Fasna is asking, what was the biggest problem you avoided just by asking the question?
Just by asking the question. Oh, that's an interesting one. There was a company that I worked at for a long time where we had implicitly assumed that if we had perfect data that was all dependent on these other APIs, that we could build all these really cool features. And we started asking hard questions about how we actually pull that off and why it matters. And it helped us to identify this set of assumptions that we had, which was that all of these features would be really useful if we had perfect data. And by interrogating it in a rigorous way, we figured out that we would never have perfect data and that we should basically stop building that entire feature set because it was predicated on something that wasn't real.
Just by one question?
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Props to that.
I've been asking it about 100 times to a lot of different people, but yeah.
Are you there yet? Are you there yet?
What's that?
Shoot.
Sorry.
No worry.
It's the echo.
Oh, the echo, okay. So like the question, are we there yet? Are we there yet?
That's right.
Keep on asking.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So the Mr. Anonymous user is asking, when are you going to build a Laravel board game?
Well, good question. I've made several games using Laravel. That's why I learned to write code in the first place. And none of them have been board games. You know, they've all been games designed to be played over the web. So that is an interesting question, and I've thought a lot about it. And I'm learning a lot about the difference between like things that can happen asynchronously versus things that are like really client-heavy, where you need the client to be really smart. So perhaps coming this year, but we'll see. Who knows?
Okay,
Thank you.
Eager for that. So big applause for John Drexler.
Thank you.